This is gonna hurt. It's time for the Suffering Podcast.
An invisible enemy, real or imagined, is often blown out of proportion or underestimated. You can make a mountain out of a molehill or show up with a knife to a gunfight. An unseen adversary must still be approached with caution. Without the proper tools or understanding, it's easy to be overrun. Then playing catch-up, trying to gather weapons to fight. You're put back on your heels playing defense rather than offense. A lack of respect for an opponent ensures that victory is a slim chance. You are then left without the would'ves and should'ves, wondering what could have been done to fight the war, allowing success. I'm Kevin Donaldson, always here with Mike Felice, and welcome to the Suffering Podcast. If you're a fan of overcoming adversity and overcoming suffering, then we're for you, because that's what we do here, and that's the stories that we highlight. So do me a favor, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, please comment, ring the bell so you can get notified of all of our new content. Now you can join. Follow us on all social media so you can find out what we're up to. On this episode of the Suffering Podcast, we welcome Stefanie Shellhamer to discuss the suffering of something we've been staying away from for so long, and that's the suffering of COVID.
Yes.
You know, I'm telling you right now, this is an episode that Mike and I had talked about doing for so long, but we were unable to because of certain restrictions. But guess what? We're demonetized. We can do whatever we want to do. Thank you for coming in, Stefanie. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. It means a lot.
It's going to be great. It's going to be great. And before we get into anything, let's throw a big shout out to our marquee sponsor. That's Toyota of Hackensack. We don't trust anybody as podcasters and former police officers, but we do trust Toyota Hackensack. So go to toyotahackensack.com and let them find you a car. So, Stefanie, each week we take a question from one of our audience members. This question comes from Anvils and Nails. And they ask, when is it time to give tough love? Now, coming from your past and knowing what I know about you, there has been a time when somebody should have, if they didn't, given you tough love. And you try to carry that information on into your future self.
Correct.
So when do you believe that it's time to give tough love?
That's a great question, first of all. I definitely can relate to this. The tough love was definitely given. I remember when, my life kind of started to take a different direction. I was having issues with, which I shared with you, substance use, and my father, who's a police officer.
They kind of contradict each other.
They absolutely do.
Yeah.
We'll get to that, I'm sure. But the time to give tough love is when the love that you're giving and the enabling is actually hurting the person that you love, because that's a huge thing. Like, my family, my father, my whole family really, but mostly my father, because he was in like the thick of it with me, did not enable me and just allow me to hurt myself and throw my life away, but still came and showed up for me. But tough love is like the purest form of love, because if somebody is hurting themselves through whatever, substance use, and you're just allowing them by enabling them and giving them like a soft cushion to land, you're killing them. They're never going to get better.
Tough love is a difficult thing, because you like this person, obviously, who you're friends with. You have some sort of affection for them, some sort of love for them. Before recent tragedies with Mike, my tough love, I had to be pushed to a point where I just could not take it anymore until it's time to say, dude, what the fuck? And I was there with Mike. A lot of us were there with Mike. But for whatever reason, I was too afraid to lose my friend as a friend, because I saw his life imploding. Tough love should have come sooner than it had, and I got to live with that guilt. Now, I just did this not too long ago. Tough love comes. I have to be willing to lose that person as a friend, lose them as an acquaintance, lose them in my life, as long as it saves their life. So the time for tough love is when you become so frustrated and you're watching that person slide down a very slippery slope, and you want to try to do everything you can in order to stop that. Tough love needs to come quick, it needs to come fast, and you can never wait too long, because if you wait one day too long, and this is what happened here, you wait one day too long, you live with that guilt and that regret, and that's something that we should never live with.
Can I share something with you?
You share whatever. This is a podcast. We're supposed to talk.
So you just sparked something for me too. I as well have a very, very close friend. I'm not going to say too much. I want to keep it just a friend, right? A close friend. and it's the same situation. We got clean around the same time. You know, I have 5 years clean and sober, so I, you know, went through that journey in 2019, and this person followed suit shortly after. But there was a time there where this person was struggling, and I was trying to like be that person who was helping them and being there for them and bringing them to meetings with me. But it got to a point now, fast forward 5 years, and this person is still just caught in the grips. That's what we say, right? And it's been difficult for me because I've recently gone no contact with this person out of that same space, like tough love. I need to protect myself because that's another thing. Like we can't pour from an empty cup. And if I'm consistently, you know, pouring into somebody who is not reciprocating and is not changing, and isn't maybe able to take those steps, willing to take those steps, then I got to protect me. I got to protect my peace. And I love this person. This is like my best friend.
You love
And
them so much. So here's the difficult part. Tough love can never be given to somebody who you don't care about.
right.
Because then it's just fuck you and get
Yeah,
away from me, and you
exactly.
never have to talk to them again. Tough love has to be given to somebody who is so close to you, so intimately close to you, that it's going to be a hole in your life without them, and you know it. But unfortunately, it's a necessary evil that you have to inflict.
Exactly. That's where I'm at. So
Well,
great question.
I wish this person a lot of luck,
I know,
and
me
if
too.
we have a lot of resources now.
Yes,
So
I appreciate that.
make sure we're stronger together than apart.
Absolutely.
So Anvils and Nails, thank you so much for the question. Keep sending in your questions, and we will try to get them on the air. And while you're at it, head over to see Gus over at Cubita Cafe, 234 Franklin Avenue. Some of the most delicious food by a classically trained chef. Gus is not in the food business; he's in the people business. So when you're in there, you're part of his family, and I guarantee you're going to have a good meal. So 234 Franklin Avenue. Go see Gus at Cubita Cafe. You won't be disappointed. So we've made contact after the recent tragedy. You reach out to us on social media, and you told me the backstory. You lost your father because of COVID, and obviously we have never been able to talk about COVID because we would have been when our channel was monetized, they would have taken us down right away. But guess what? The gloves are off, and we can finally talk about something that affected not one person. This is a suffering that's affected everybody.
Absolutely.
And it's time to start bringing it to light. And it's affected you more than most. Before we get into that, you're a Lyndhurst girl.
I am.
Are you born and bred in Lyndhurst?
I was born early on bred, and then I moved, and now I'm back.
You always return to Lyndhurst.
Always.
So where did you move? Where did you move from?
So my parents divorced when I was about 5 or 6 years old.
Mark of any good cop.
Right, absolutely. My dad was like typical like 30s divorced dad that all my friends like loved. He was one of those. So my parents split. I moved to Little Falls in Passaic County. It's actually not far from here. And my dad stayed in Lyndhurst, and I kind of did like the back and forth thing my whole childhood. So I did visit Lyndhurst like 50-50, but my home base was really in another town because I went to school there, and my father was still a police officer in Lyndhurst, and all my family was from Lyndhurst. So there was always that connection.
So it's a weird dynamic being from divorced parents, because some people it empowers, but some people it breaks. So were your parents both actively involved, or did one just slide off? Because that
No.
happens as well.
They were both extremely actively involved. If my dad had it his way, we would have still been living in his house. Like, he did not want me to go with my mom, and the dynamics of that was truly just that I was super young and wanted to stay with my mom, and my sister was a little older than me and wanted to stay in the town that she had built a life already. I was still like barely in first grade.
Oh, so you and your sister split as well.
So we split as well. But the dynamic there was that I was constantly back and forth, and she would also come back and forth to my mom's house. But my dad was like super dad to me, because for the time that I moved to Little Falls till the day I got my license, he made that drive from Lyndhurst to Little Falls. We joked about it. We must have made that drive like 30,000 hours altogether, because we was just back and forth. He never missed a day. I slept there 2 nights a week. I was there every other weekend. So
That warms my heart, because I see this too often in divorce, where parents will separate because they can't get along, but they
Right.
have this mutual connection between them called children, and you divorce each other. You don't divorce your children.
Absolutely.
You know, they're your blood. They got your blood running through their veins, and they didn't ask to be born. And
Absolutely.
too many people use it. We've seen it often in here. Too many parents will get divorced and use their children as pawns in some sort of chess game.
Hmm.
What was the relationship between your mother and your father post-divorce?
Great question. I was just talking about this. So in the beginning, it was a little rough. It was like, a lot of resentment,
They're learning how to live separate lives.
heartbreak. Yeah. It wasn't the best. And my dad really kind of took the brunt, I'd say, of like the heartbreak. It was more so my mom. My parents met when they were really young. My mom was like 15. They were like they grew up on the same street.
Your dad wasn't 30 when she was 15.
No,
Okay,
he was
thank
not.
God.
They were both in high school.
There's rules against that.
There certainly are. But it just didn't work out. Like, it was each other's first love, but that doesn't always mean that's really like the person for you, but you, like you said, you bring children into this world, you have a bond forever. So there was a lot of heartbreak. And then also, my dad, it killed him that me and my sister were kind of split.
Yeah,
He
you
wanted so badly to he begged to just keep the family in Lyndhurst. But my mom, she's a human too, and she deserved to live her life in the way that she saw fit. But they definitely didn't get along at first. And then it evolved. It evolved to more of like a co-parenting, to like a mutual love and respect. And that's beautiful because, my dad left this earth with him and my mom having like a common ground.
very rare. It's a very rare thing, two people that can get past their own, because you got to drop your ego.
Right.
You invested so much time and so many resources into this marriage, this union, and it doesn't work out. And all of a sudden, you what you thought was concrete is really made out of sand, and it just crumbles
Yep.
before you. But that's a great story, and I love the fact that your father was willing to go, because that's what a father is. A
That's
father,
right.
being a father myself, I cannot imagine the pain of not seeing my children every single day.
Mm-hmm.
And as bad as sometimes me and my wife fight, that will keep me steadfast on a lot of things, because
Absolutely.
I don't ever want to be that person. And I know if we were to ever split up, that I wouldn't be able to see my kids every day. And that would kill me. That would
I
kill
think
me.
that's the story for a lot of people. You're not alone in that, I assume.
Unfortunately, not enough. Unfortunately, not enough. But anyway, so you move on in your life, and you're living in Little Falls.
Mm-hmm.
Your dad is in your life.
Yes.
Both your parents are in your life. What was the crowd like that you hung around?
So in high school and in middle school, grammar school, I was always very smart, very, very good in school. I always got straight A's. I was in like the little gifted and talented class. Like, I would get pulled out of class once a week, and we got to like do smart kid shit, and that was cool. So because I had that going for me, I think my crowd didn't immediately like raise red flags, but I would say, I played sports too. So definitely like a lot of jocks, a lot of popular kids, but I somehow, and this is like the interesting thing about addiction, that like it starts way before you put like a drink or drug in your body. Like, we somehow all found each other, like the kind of kids that were like still trying to like do the right thing and like played sports and did good in school, but like experimented with drugs. That's as blatant as I can put it.
That's children finding their way.
Yeah.
And it so it kills me with my kids. Here's exactly what I tell my kids with addiction, because I am an addict and I know I'm an addict. So I looked at them straight in the eye and I said, there's two types of people. There's the people who can pick up a drink now and never pick it up again. They can do a line of cocaine today, never do a line of cocaine again. But then there's the other type of person that can take one drink and become an alcoholic, take one line of cocaine and be a drug addict. The difference is, and here's the gamble. The gamble is you don't know which one you are.
Exactly.
And there's only one way to find out, and it's a huge roll of the dice.
It absolutely is.
So what was the first drug that you ever tried?
So definitely, we'll throw alcohol in first because alcohol is a drug. But
what age?
after that, I probably started drinking more so once I got into high school, like my freshman year, 14. But like,
Great.
yeah,
My
no,
son's a freshman.
it's so young. I look at the 14-year-olds now. My siblings are in high school. They're children, but they're good kids. I don't know what it was. It's like you said, you don't know which one you're gonna be. And that was the issue. Like, I didn't know that experimenting with substances, and it was a lot of like turmoil that I was going through that I didn't understand, like through my parents divorcing and like,
Parents don't see that stuff, so they don't look at their own lives. They always see themselves as something different than their children. And I'm going to put this in perspective. So I got my first tattoo when I was 13. I did it myself.
did yourself
I
too.
did it myself. When my oldest son turned 13, I looked at him and go, "Holy shit! I gave myself a tattoo when I was his age."
Right.
And knowing that if he ever came home with a tattoo, I'd brain him.
Exactly.
So that was that holy shit moment for me. Like this kid's getting into the dangerous water. So now I gotta not lock down on him. I have to educate him. I have to
Right.
motivate him. I have to
Exactly.
show him what a future could look like if he stays clean, clear, and sober.
Right.
Is he going to stay sober the rest of his life? No.
No, kids
He's-
are gonna do their thing.
He's going to drink. He's going to smoke marijuana once or twice, and I know it, and it's going to kill me. And but I have this strange rule with my children. It's tell me the truth, and I will never get mad at you, and I promise you that. Lie to me, and you will see the beast come out in me.
That was like my dad. He absolutely hated that lying shit. He was not for it. And honestly, it wasn't until it started going south for me that like the lies had to be told. Like in the beginning, I was able to pretty much all of my addiction, I was always wearing a mask. So I was like two people. I was very good at like keeping that mask on. So when I was younger and just experimenting, it was almost like 90% of my personality was just like a high school student finding their way. But that little 10% came in when I started experimenting with substances and hanging out with the wrong crowd. And then it just kind of got to the point, which is what happens with addiction, where it was like 50-50, then 60-40. Next thing you know, 100% of my life is dedicated to getting and using and finding ways and means to get more.
So you went from alcohol. Did you
Yes.
graduate?
Oh, yeah, I graduated. Then next came cocaine. I remember trying it being so young, and just doing it because it was like rebellious. Like it was just, it got me outside of myself more than the drug.
This is
the
cool.
act.
I'm doing cocaine.
Right.
Yeah.
No, it was not cool. Just say no. But yeah, then it was like the big thing in my era, my school and stuff was like the ecstasy pills. And it's just wild to think back doing all those things and like, thank God, like especially in my earlier, younger years, nothing bad happened to me. Like, there's things that happen in my life over the course of my adult life for sure, but like I just look at myself as like thinking I knew what I was doing, right? And my dad used to be like, "You don't know shit." Like respectfully, "You don't know shit. You're 15 years old."
So I think that way as well. It's like when I was 13, I had it all figured out. Well, and when I went 18, I was
found
much
out I was
smarter,
wrong.
and then when I was 25, realized how stupid I was at 18, and so forth and so
Yes,
on.
me too.
I will be turning 50 this year, begrudgingly, and
Snaps.
I've come to a point where I don't know. But with my children, I don't tell them that they don't know anything. I tell them that you're going to learn so much about yourself in the next couple years, but don't ever make the mistake of thinking you have it all figured out. That's the only way I put that.
Yeah.
I try never to tell them because police. So you get on in the era that I got on. You'll get on, and the old timers will tell you, "Kid, you don't rookie. You don't know shit." Well, that's not 100% true.
No.
I have my life experiences. I'm fresh out of the academy. My book knowledge is better than yours. So it's
Yes.
not that I don't know shit. I lack experience.
Right.
So that would be a better way to put that. So with children, they lack experience, but you think you got it all figured out. So you're
Sure do.
invincible.
Yes.
You're doing
That's how I
cocaine,
felt.
and you're doing. So what's the years?
So like 2008, 2009.
So the
7.
fentanyl
Yeah.
problem wasn't quite there yet,
Yes.
like it is now. But
This was.
but you're always worried about getting a hot dose.
Yes.
Maybe somebody putting something extra in it.
There was a lot of that with those ecstasy pills. Like that's basically just like a bunch of shit thrown in a pill and crushed into a shape, and here you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like it's amazing that nothing bad ever happened to me, but it was that sense of invincibility. Like I remember that my whole outlook on using drugs at that age was like, well, I'll never be an addict because like an addict, like they just didn't know what they were doing. Like, this is the ignorance. Like they just didn't know how to handle it. Maybe they didn't have like another path in life to follow, like completely misguided information that I was feeding myself.
If you look back and you think about all the trust that you put on whoever's giving you this pill, this line, this joint, this bottle, the amount of trust that you had to put in that person to say, yeah, sure, give me it.
Exactly.
And we've all been there. Nobody's immune to it. And guess what? In the 50s, nobody was immune to it then. In the 40s,
Right.
nobody was immune to it then. So every generation, as they go up, they say, oh, these kids, they don't know what they're doing. Well, you didn't know what you were doing
Exactly.
either.
There was always like something else hitting the streets.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, my dad used to tell me that too. Like, you don't know what you're getting. You don't know what these people are putting in it. You don't know, like, it's just not safe.
So you move on.
Yes.
So you got cocaine. What's next? So you got this
Yes.
ecstasy, and then what?
Now it's the opioid epidemic. I was a victim of the opioid epidemic for sure.
So is that what got you?
Yes.
Yeah. What was your choice?
So what happened was,
The key component to any law enforcement officer being the best version of themselves is through education. Sherry Alsop is a leader in providing that education to police agencies, preparing them for the all too frequent dealings with sexual assault victims.
You've seen Sherry on episode 169 of the Suffering Podcast. She survived incest and almost daily sexual assault, so she comes from a place of experience and true understanding.
Sherry has the intelligence, commitment, and compassion to open the eyes of those on the front lines, while providing the tools to effectively deal with a difficult situation. Sherry's instruction comes from experience and multiple certifications.
Training with Sherry will offer on-site training, customized schedules, specialized instruction tailored from a victim's perspective.
You are going to hear Sherry's heart-wrenching but inspiring survivor story. Learn proprietary trauma-informed training techniques. Uncovered victim-centered interview methods while earning continuing education credits according to your state guidelines. To be the best, you must learn from the best. Let Sherry also guide you through the delicate cases of sexual assault from a victim's point of view.
Be a source of comfort to those victims affected by these traumatic experiences while producing a solid investigation and uncovering details that often go unnoticed.
To find out more or to contact Sherry Alsop, go to sherryalsop.com. That's SherryAllsup.com.
I went to college right out of high school. I went to Bergen Community first, and then I went to Montclair State after that. In my first couple years of college, that wasn't introduced yet. So it was a lot of marijuana smoking, the little party drugs like on the weekends, but never like daily use. Even the marijuana, I was more smoking with people in a group, that kind of thing. Parties, exactly. But once I turned 20 and I was starting my, I already got my associates. Now I'm going for my bachelor's. I met a guy. This is like famous last words. I met a guy. And he was just like me, young. He was an attractive, had the persona of somebody that, has their life together. Nice clothes. This is what I thought as a 20-year-old because they had nice clothes and stuff. And, a family that was, providing this to them, that they must be, good news because anybody that I thought that fit that mold would look different, like an addict or somebody that's trouble.
You're not going to date somebody hanging out in front of the gas station begging for money.
Exactly. Perfect way to put it. So I started dating him, and within a month, a few weeks in, he tells me that, because we had been from the same scene, the party scene, so drugs was definitely in both of our lives, but not consistent, I thought. But he told me that he used Percocets, and not just the Percocets, but the 30 milligram oxycodone, no Tylenol. It's straight. It's like a bag of heroin in a pill.
And back then, the doctors would prescribe them freely.
They sure were. And they were on the streets way more. This was, 2012. And, they've cracked down a lot on it, but prescribing them.
They've rubber banded so far the other way medically, where if you go in for something where you actually may need it, they won't give it to you.
Yeah, no, that's another issue. I'm on that wagon as well. I think that's wrong for people who really need the medication, but it's a double-edged sword.
And now the lack of prescribing is producing more heroin addicts because heroin is cheaper. A pill listen, I may be dating myself here. There's a lot of inflation involved. Your insurance, say it's $10 for a pill of oxys. Well, a pill of oxy on the street is $30.
Right.
Well, guess what? A little bag of heroin is anywhere from $3 to $7.
Yep.
And if you get the good stuff, you can snort it. So you're not a full junkie yet.
Exactly.
But once you inject it, that's sort of that crossover. And eventually, because it's a quicker high, it's a better high. That's what it is. But it's producing a lot of those. So where were you getting them from? I mean, don't give me a name. I
No,
don't want to
definitely wouldn't give
incriminate
you a
anybody.
name. But the street.
John.
I don't think there was ever a John. Their names were always like not their real name, you know? It was like Scooby, though. I just made that up, but something like that. I remember being like, I'm not going down this road, right? Like I had that like mini moment of clarity, like this is gonna be bad. Like I knew that this was a drug that you became physically dependent on. Like I had knowledge. Like I don't know if it was because who my dad was and just, I was always curious.
Were
like
you living there? Are
with
you
my
living
dad?
No, are you living at Montclair State? Or
No,
you're
I did not.
commuting?
I commuted.
Okay. Because living there would have made it easier.
It would have made it a lot easier. Probably would have unraveled faster, but I was able to keep up the act for like way too long, which just prolonged my suffering. The suffering podcast.
Yeah, well, that's why. Well, listen, you wouldn't be here if your life was all sunshine and rainbows,
exactly.
unfortunately.
So then we started using them, even though I was very skeptical. It was like, if you can't beat them, join them. And I was in that mode of like, once you put one in you, it might not, like, addiction is a progressive illness. Like, it just gets worse over time. So you may have control in the beginning years and, the experimenting, or maybe you just didn't find a drug that you felt like you wanted to use every day. It's a lot of, pick and choose. And eventually I landed on that and I was like, this is it. Like, this is how I want to feel forever. Like, whatever I have to do, I'm just going to have kids and I'm going to get married and I'm going to have a career, but I'm going to do these drugs too. That's really like what I thought I could manage.
So what is it about the feeling of an opiate?
Yes. Good question.
And just so everybody knows, this does roll into COVID very, very shortly.
Yes.
But what is it about that feeling? Because I had a similar experience. So I do come from experience. I had a shoulder surgery. Doctor kept prescribing, says take them as prescribed, and I did. I for once in my life, I followed directions.
Nice.
It was bad though. It turned out really bad. So I'm taking these oxys, and I got to go back to work. So finally, I said, I got to get off these things. It took me 3 days and a lot of sleeping pills because I couldn't get to sleep.
Absolutely.
It just
It's
felt like
terrible.
everything was crawling.
It's awful.
And I'm like, you son of a bitch, you got me hooked on these
Right.
things. I knew, like I was cognizant enough to know what was going on. I was in my 30s probably at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And it took me 3 days to kick this stuff. I
Yep.
go, this is awful. Is this? I guess this is what heroin.
Yes. Times like
addiction is
50. But
Yeah.
yes. Coming off of opiates of any kind is like hell.
Your
on
pain
earth.
receptors are just so raw.
Yes, and you were only probably on it for however long, but imagine
4
being
months.
on it for like on and off for like 7 years. That was me.
I
So it was miserable.
remember that Dr. Drew just used to run a show. It was called like Sober House or something like that, or something. It was celebrities who were drug addicts.
Right.
And there was one guy on there. His name was Jeff Conaway. Jeff Conaway was Kanicki in Greece, and he was
Nice.
hooked on opiates. And I remember watching an episode where he's laying in bed and he's just crying because he's in so much pain. He's coming off the opiates. And I remember watching that going, God, that's awful. But it did happen to me in a lesser degree than he had. He'd been on it for 20 years. But I watched that and I go, oh my God, that's awful. So when it happened to me, I knew what it was, but I also knew that I can go down this road real easy.
Right.
And I was so scared. Now, while you were doing these opiates, because it does dull your decision making.
That too.
Tell me about some of the bad decisions you made when you were high.
Great question. So, as time went on, I was, like I said, trying to keep up the act, which I managed to do. But then, you need the pills to function because you got to go to school. I had like 2 jobs. Like, who the hell's like, I was like always with 2 jobs. Like, I don't even have to pay any bills, but I'm working 2 jobs. So I got myself into all these like extracurricular things, and now I'm addicted to drugs. So it's like, you need the money. And, probably the craziest thing I've ever done, it's nothing too explicit at all. It's the freaking stealing copper.
Oh,
So that
that's your
story,
typical
I tell,
addict move.
it's typical addict move. I remember, so I'll tell you a quick story. So at the very end of my road, like the first time I'd say, but when it was probably the worst for me, when I was with this guy, we had been using for like 3 years. And how my family didn't know, I think that part of them just didn't want to know. Like, it was really like this, I also never showed my face. Like, I would be at school all day, then work, and then I would come home and be sleeping. Nobody saw me. So it was easy to get away with it. But I I remember the ex-boyfriend at the time was my boyfriend. He was driving my car, no license, suspended license, of course, like got pulled over, and we did this like mission. He had all these like wild ideas, and I knew enough because my father was a police officer. I was like, keep me out of it. Like, I don't want my car there. You can't take my car to do any of that stuff. You can't like, but the desperation is getting worse. So it's like the pull of like, if you don't do this, you're going to be sick, miserable, and worse, found out. Because I felt like I had to be okay to function and see my family and stuff, or they were going to know. Like, I couldn't just be like kicking opiates and then be like, well, what's going on with you? And I just felt like they were going to find out. And that was like my worst fear. So the draw of like the fast money was getting to be like, I felt like I had no option. And that's like a part of addiction. It's like you're a slave. Like, you don't have a choice. So one of the nights I went with him, and there was like this school being built, and he lived in Clifton, right on the border of like South Patterson. So there was this school being built, and he would like get these pipes, and it was a 2-person job, obviously. That's why I had to get involved, that were like the size of like bigger than this table in length and like thick. I remember helping him carry that pipe, being like, this is the worst, this is my low, like this is the bottom, like it can't get any lower, like there's no trapdoor, like this is the worst. And feeling like having like an outer body experience, imagining myself doing it, like it didn't even feel like it was real life.
I was wondering if you were thinking to yourself, okay, well, oh, this is what addiction is.
Yes,
this
I
is
was like, you're an addict at this point. There was no, and I just would always think about my dad, like in these moments.
Your parents is still in your life, and they're proud parents of a college girl.
Yeah.
They're trying their best to give you and provide for you this good life that's going to set you up for success. And here you are in the back end destroying it and sabotaging it.
Completely.
They were still there, and when they saw you, you were lucid. You were able to hide everything.
Yeah.
Was there a point where they suspected?
Yeah, I'd say. My dad always would talk about the people I was around, more so than are you on drugs. It was always, you are who you hang out with. That was his favorite line. And he was so right. Because like coming into recovery, that's what they say, like avoid people, places, and things. And I had to completely change everybody in my life. I don't talk to anybody other than like friends that didn't do drugs from my past. Not a soul. But that was like the conversations I'd have with my dad. And he was right. Like, he never liked who I hung out with. And I was always like, you don't know them. They're good people.
But your behavior is changing. And your dad being a police officer who is sensitive to this, he's out on the streets, he's watching this stuff. Was there some questions being thrown at you by him?
I would say, but I always had like an excuse and a lie. And that's where I think the thing comes in, where it's like maybe he didn't really want to know. And I always thought that was impossible. I'm like, my dad is too much of a like control, like if he knew something was up, like he'd want to get to the bottom of it. But as time went on and I look back, like, how did you not know?
Well, addicts are Academy Award winning actors. And I know this from my own experience. So when I had some serious alcohol issues, I had alcohol hid everywhere. Right. And the only way you know that I had an alcohol problem is if I didn't have any.
Right. That was my fear. That's why I could never run out of money.
Right. So you're constantly chasing that you need this just to stay normal. And so I would hide liquor bottles. There was liquor bottles hidden all over my house. And not until about 6 months ago did my wife know that.
Wow. Yeah, there's stuff I'm sharing right now that my family's never heard.
Yeah, it's strange. So when you were stealing that copper and you said, I'm an addict, was that your first moment where, okay, I got to figure something out?
Yeah. Once it got to that level, I feel like I got more afraid to reveal like what was going on because it got that low. Like, it was so just like in, the 12-step fellowship that I'm in, we use these like buzzwords. One of them is like living at an animalistic level. That was how I was living. So it was even harder to reveal myself to these people that I was trying so hard. It was like living a double life. It was like you had like 6 full-time jobs, like getting and using, lying to your family and keeping that act up, wearing that mask. Plus, I was still in school. I graduated on time. I may have had like one victory lap where I stayed till like year 3, but I graduated college. And that's another thing that my family always said, like, they were like, well, if she's still in school, like that was like
Doing
their,
something right.
that was their marker. Like, well, she's in school, she has a job.
But that's something that people don't understand about addicts. The majority of addicts, I'm talking about the vast majority of addicts, so not the people you step over in the street.
Mm-hmm.
They're the people that are working in
Yes.
the bank.
Yep.
They're the people that are serving you food. They're the majority of addicts. They're functional addicts, and they're
Yes.
very good. Their time is coming where if they don't get it under control, they can be that
will
person.
be them. Yes.
Because that person was keeping it together who was on the street. They were keeping it together
Yeah,
at
they
some
had
point.
their time.
Yeah. So, and addicts are also, especially successful addicts, are notoriously successful. They are overachievers because I've said this on previous shows where if they screw up a little bit, maybe they come in a little hungover or they leave a little early to hit the bar, their bosses are like, let them go. They're doing such a
Right,
great job.
exactly.
So they overlook the bad behavior.
Right.
And that sounds like what's happening to you. You were doing great. You graduate college. Now you're on to the next phase in your life, but you also realize that you have a problem.
Yes.
When was your first time where you tried to pull it back?
So when I kind of got off track at some point, but when I was telling the story about the boyfriend driving my car with no license, he ended up getting pulled over. The police took one look at the car and like, you just know, like, it just looks like people is just trashed, like copper, probably.
Oh, there was copper in the car?
There was copper in the car.
Okay.
He somehow got it like cut. I don't know, where he had a guy and the guy had a guy and all this nonsense. And then some of it was in my trunk. And they told my dad, because the kicker was the car was mine, registered under my dad's name. So when they took one look at the car and then they started to kind of like piece together, because there was like all those stolen copper incidents and now the kids got the copper in the car, they were like, okay, we're uncovering something here. It was like this big, crime spree. But the Passaic County Sheriff went to my father's house. This is like the lowest point in my life.
The guy who just took his life, the Burnick.
Oh, yes.
That was him, yeah.
Yes, I remember. He might have been involved. They didn't know my dad was a police officer, police captain at that time. Right before he retired is when this all happened. And they went to his house and like banged on the door, like SWAT. I still to this day, like, it just doesn't even seem real because that was like my worst nightmare.
Oh, so they thought that was
my dad was like involved.
That was the hideout. That was where everything was happening.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They just went to where the car, who's this person? And I wasn't even there to say like, no, that's my father. Like they still would have, told him. But at that point, that was my first, like, really like my higher power, like throwing me like a bone because I was not getting out of that situation. It was also wildly abusive. He used to hit me, drag me. It was so toxic and so terrible that I felt like I could not leave because he was like somebody I was dependent on to keep this lie going. That's the worst place to be. You're getting beat on, who at the time, like my whole life, I had self-worth. Like it went to a point where it was on the wayside because this addiction was stronger and driving me to do things that were not in my nature. But like, I loved myself because I was loved. Like my father, my mother, they loved me. And I was just like, if my father only knew what this boy was doing to me, like
they would kill him.
He would have been in jail. So I tried to keep that,
but
too.
You get like a Stockholm syndrome. And if you don't know what Stockholm syndrome is, it's Patty Hearst. So Patty Hearst was kidnapped by this terrorist cell, and she goes and she ends up robbing a bank with them because she feels it's very good manipulation. These people who do these things are very, very good at manipulating, and they make you think that you are nothing without them, that you need them, and you are part of them.
Oh yeah, he told me that, and it's like I look back at those moments where he was like, he would tell me like, you're not gonna be shit. Like you ruined your life. You're never gonna look good again. You're like, cause I looked like shit at the end. Like, let's keep it real. Like I was probably 130 pounds, but I'm like 5'8". So I was like a walking skeleton. Like I looked probably like 20 years older. Like it was not a good scene. And he had me like convinced that like my life was over and I would never recover from this. And I believed it. I was like, damn, like, I don't know how I'm going to go on. And like now I look at my life like in grad school, 4.0, going to be a licensed therapist. Like
You're going to be just fine.
I'm going to be just fine. Joke's on him. But the point of that whole thing was that the police went to my dad's house and he found out everything. And that was like my, you know, first, like, I got pulled out of that. So then I went on like a maintenance medication, Suboxone.
Mm-hmm.
And I was on that for about a year and a half. That was brutal coming off of that.
Well, Suboxone it creates another addiction, and this is what I find out about it. Suboxone was a foreign substance to me years ago.
Yeah, it's pretty new.
But what people go on Suboxone, and all of a sudden they just get hooked on the Suboxone. So you trade one drug for another. You trade one dependency for another. It just, I guess, it's more legal.
It's more legal, and it will serve its purpose if it's being used by someone who is somewhat ready. And at that time, I thought I was ready. I didn't want to live like that anymore. Those last few months were like the worst times of my life to date. Like, I did not want to live like that. So it was like kind of like my savior out of that situation, because now I don't have to lie. My family knows, like, I'm on medication. But the idea was always to come off of it. And my family...
The hammer's going to drop in a minute with your father, and I know it.
Exactly.
I know it's coming.
Yes. He was the one who was like, you know, he wanted me to get help. And they asked me if I wanted to go to rehab. I said no. I was like, no, I know what I'm doing. Like, I know what Suboxone is. All my friends got clean with that. But it didn't last. No, it didn't last. By 2017, the year and a half later after I came off of it, I didn't immediately use opiates, but eventually... people, places, and things. I started hanging out with the same type of people who were from the same areas where drugs were readily available. Like, something drew me into that, like, lifestyle. And it was just like, I think that was all I knew. And I didn't find like myself fitting into other spaces and feeling like comfortable. It was just like,
you found comfort there.
Yeah.
That's very, very common.
Yeah.
So you go back, you relapse in 2017.
Yes.
And how bad did it get?
It got pretty bad again. It got to the point where I remember I was like, okay, you know, I just came off of this medication. I told the guy that I was talking to now about my past, like, how bad it was and that I like beat that addiction. But mind you, I was only not using opiates. I was still drinking, messing around with coke with like my normie friends. Like, I still was using. Like, I never got the freedom from addiction at all. But I remember I was like, just this weekend, I'm going to get one. And I don't think I ever skipped a day. It was that day, the next day, the next day, the next day. That went on for a little over a year. And at that point, I said something. I said to my family, I called my mom. I was sitting in my car in Newark. I remember I had no gas, no money, waiting on somebody who was supposed to do me a favor and like give me one pill. And it was like I was sitting there for like 5 hours. And this person's like, yeah, I'm almost there. This went on. And I was just like, that was the second, like, that was like that bottom and that realization, like, I am a puppet. Like, I have no control over what I do. I can't leave this spot because I don't have any drugs. I don't have any money. Like, I'm at people's mercy. And I didn't like that feeling.
But your father, you had told me your father was integral in getting you help. The help that maybe not the help you wanted, but the help you needed.
Yes.
And he was standing there behind you because... He was. Do you have children?
No.
When you see your child for the first time, you finally realize A, what true worry is, and B, what true love is.
Oh, that's nice.
It's 100% truth. And if you don't feel that, get the hell out and give the kid up for adoption too, and give him a chance. So your father sounds like a loving father. Sounds like he was always attached to you, and then comes and gets you help and comes to your rescue. He is the police officer. He is the doer. He is the superhero wearing a badge. And now it's time to help his daughter with this horrible, horrible problem.
Yes.
And I guess he did it.
He did. He drove me to rehab. And I'll never forget the car, I call them the car talks. Every time my dad would pick me up from a situation like that, like, you know, when I first said I need to go to rehab, or like other times where I was like in trouble and I needed him and I had no choice, like, he would always give me these like loving but real ass lectures, I want to say, talks in the car where I did not say a word. It was like not my place to speak. Like he wanted to talk. And it was always coming from a place of like hurt and worry as my father. And never like oh, you're like, he never ever like shamed me or like brought up the true, like, you know, I don't want to, this is what I say, like junkie shit that I was doing and being like, that's the lowest of the low, but it was.
Well, this sort of transitions into why we're here tonight. And the reason we had to lay that groundwork is to realize that from your father, specifically your father, I'm not saying your mother didn't love you, but specifically for your father, that groundwork to know that your kid's in trouble and I need to go help my child get free of this. And he does this and he's successful at doing this and he's integral in your recovery and your sobriety. And then this thing happens to the world in March of 2020, where we've heard about this thing coming over from China, there's virus and it's supposed to be super strong and, you know, everybody sort of ignored it. And then it comes into California and then it starts working its way across the country. And of course, we're talking about COVID. And what was your father's reaction? We're trying to sort of changing gears here, but what was your father's reaction to when the whole pandemic started?
Great question, because I always remembered that. I remember texting him. It was like March 13th, 16th, like right around the time when like the world shut down. It was like in the United States, and being like, Dad, like it's here. Did you hear? Like, and he was like, oh, it's nothing. It's like the flu. We're all going to get it. And I was like, we're all going to get it? Like, I was like, he just knew. He was very smart. He just did a lot of research, and I didn't know that. I was like, I thought it was going to like hit a few people and they were going to be the unlucky ones, but he's like, no, it's like the next flu. It's going to hit everyone. We're all going to end up getting it. And people like us don't have complications. People like us don't die from COVID. He literally said that. And he believed that, and I believe that. And I think most people believe that. Like, when they got COVID, unless they were like immunocompromised or
comorbidities or something like that,
they weren't like worried, especially once it started to like make its way in the country and people saw like, yes, there was devastating effects for like the elderly, but like a lot of people got it and they just recovered from it.
Well, the statistics that came out originally where the COVID deaths came along with an average of 4 comorbidities within that person, whether they're overweight or they had heart problems or they're a smoker or whatever. And they listed all these different things, but there was so much misinformation being thrown around that nobody really knew what to believe. It was what do I believe this week?
Right.
So when it first came out, I had a very similar attitude as your father. All right, if I get it, I get it. There's nothing I can do about it. I knew these things hit. I've seen these things before, and we do lose some people. It's just, it's a fact of life. We do lose some of these people. And, you know, who was the first person in your family to get it?
I think it was me.
And what were your symptoms? Did you get the first wave or the second wave?
Yeah, so I think I had it twice. I had it, I think it was the first wave, and then I got like the third, which was Omicron.
I had the Omicron. That's what I had.
I missed Delta, and that was the one that my dad most likely had because it was around the time that Delta was around, which I remember being like, it hit some people harder.
The Omicron, super sore throat.
It was supposed to be the more mild of the three, but like came with those type of symptoms, like the sore throat, like you felt like you just were sick with like the flu. And that's kind of how I felt.
My COVID experience was absolutely fantastic.
That's
so
good.
all my kids got it. Me and my kids got it at the same time. And we sat in the back room together, and I got 5 days to watch TV and movies with my kid. It was actually
awesome.
a really great experience. But I know the Delta, or the second variant, that was a little bit more harsh, and that was what people were afraid of. But see, I had worked outside. I worked through the whole thing. And I worked outside, and everybody, so I do construction during the day, and everybody who worked in construction had it, because they're a bunch of dirty motherfuckers. Okay,
and you're all like together in like huddles, I feel.
You go into a porta-john. Well, it's just like a living COVID bacterium culture.
It's a virus in itself.
So they all had it. And these guys were all fine. They got it. They were over it. They're back to work, and they were fine. So the fear factor for me, you know, I think if I was sitting home all day watching the news like most people, I would have been a lot more scared of it. But your father also, the reason this relates to you is your father was out there. He was working during this whole thing. He had to be, whatever modified schedule he
Right.
was on. So he had to be out there working during all this thing. So he saw it. He saw the bad, but he also saw the reality of it.
Right.
And when he got that Delta version, was there any fear in him at all?
None. And my dad's whole house had it at the same time. So my brother, my sister, my stepmom, and my dad all had it. And they all were like fine in the beginning, especially. Like I would text my dad every day, how you feeling? I was just giving him like words of encouragement. Like I remember when it hit, like first he's like, I'm feeling a little better. Like I'm starting to turn the corner. And then like a few days later, which was like maybe a week in, I remember him saying like, I'm not feeling good again. And I'm like, don't worry, like it's coming. You're about to like get over the hump. Like you'll feel better soon.
Time.
Yes, time heals all. But then by like day 10, he was getting worse. And like, this is when it first became a little concerning. My dad was not eating or drinking. He like wasn't able to like get food down. And then the final straw was like he went to go walk to the bathroom and he like couldn't go. Like he couldn't walk. So my stepmom had to help him. And then that was the day she's like, we're going to bring you to the hospital just to get checked out. He never complained of not being able to breathe, not once. And then when they got him to the hospital, I was like not worried because this is my dad we're talking about. Like,
And he's in the right place.
Solid. Yeah, this is where he needs to be. He's going to get fluids. They're going to give him like, some vitamins. He'll be good. My sister, though, my older sister, she's a couple years older than me, and she's like my dad. Like, she's more like, she wants to fix the problem and more like maybe not cynical, but, she was more worried. I was like, he's going to be fine. She did not like it one bit as soon as he went there. And then he got admitted, and I still was like, oh my God. My worry was like, my poor dad, like this man has never been hospitalized in his life. He had one overnight stay in a hospital when he had his knee replacement surgery. That was it. He's never been sick. Like he has no conditions. Like he just got a physical like a few months before this happened, and they were like, maybe you could probably lose 10 pounds, but that's because his knee. He blamed it on his knee. He couldn't work out because his knee. That's why I gained weight. But other than that, he was like perfectly healthy. So they, when he got to the hospital, they basically were like, your oxygen is like scary low. Like it was like in the low 80s.
Right.
And it's supposed to be like 98 to 100. So they were like,
And that's that pulse ox that they put on your finger. Yeah.
Which they said with COVID, what was unique about COVID was that if a patient presented to the hospital with that low of an oxygen pulse ox, they would be not able to breathe. Like if it was from maybe their asthma, like something other than COVID. But people with COVID were not getting that signal, like I can't breathe for some reason, but it was so low. So my dad never said he couldn't breathe. It's not like he was like, we got to get me to the hospital. I can't breathe. Like he went there and he just was like dizzy. Like he had other symptoms from not having that oxygen.
Makes sense. But eventually he starts to turn for the worst.
Yes.
Was there a moment where the fear strikes you because you see what's coming?
Yes. I remember the moment. He went in on a Sunday. They had him on the oxygen mask. He still, though, was not like sustaining like back to normal.
Even with the oxygen?
Even with the oxygen mask. I would text him and he wouldn't answer. And that was like another red flag. Like we used to send each other memes and like gifts and stuff, and he just wasn't responding. My stepmom said he couldn't talk. He just felt like shit, basically. He didn't really talk to anybody. They FaceTimed once. That was it. And then a week from that, now it was a Sunday, my mom called me and she was like, where are you? And I just knew, like, I knew something was like coming, and I was just like screaming. Like I just started screaming. I was like, what is it? And she was like, your dad took a turn today for like the worst, and they're putting him on a ventilator. And I just screamed. I feel like my neighbors upstairs thought I was like getting murdered, because that was the worst feeling, that powerlessness. Like there's nothing I can do. Like this is happening without our permission. Like this is happening. And, for the next 2.5 weeks, he was on that ventilator fighting for his life.
And eventually the inevitable happens.
And I was the one who was there that day.
And what was that date?
September 21st, 2021.
September 21st, 2021. We are at that point 6 months into, or no, we're
A
a
year
year,
and
6
6 months,
into
correct.
this COVID thing. We pretty much think that we have some stuff under control,
Definitely better.
and obviously we don't. Now, what I do know statistically, your father is an anomaly, because my father is also a COVID death, but my father was also in renal failure, and that's why he went to the hospital and got COVID in the hospital. And
Right. I remember you telling me
so
that.
that is perfectly acceptable. He, in my opinion, he's not a COVID death,
Right.
although he is classified as a COVID death.
Which is a thing. Yeah.
And that's where the statistics were ruled. Your father, what it sounds like to me, is a true COVID death. And I'm going by what you say.
Yes.
Listen, I'm not a doctor or anything like that. No comorbidities, relatively in shape, active person, none of the underlying symptoms that somebody may have. And it really must have opened everybody's eyes in your family.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, wow, you know what? Nobody's safe. Nobody's protected. And it sort of takes away your safety net.
Absolutely.
Now, this guy who was your safety net all along is now gone. How did that affect you in your recovery?
So I remember when, this was happening, I had about 2.5 years clean. And the whole process, like my recovery kicked in like overdrive, like all those things that like we talk about in meetings and people that I had met in meetings and that had lost family members, like their children, like terrible, like awful things. Seeing people come and share about that and say that they got through it clean is so important because it's showing that next person, because we all get a turn. Like we never know. When I didn't expect that 2 years into my recovery at 29 years old, I was going to lose my 59-year-old father. I was not prepared for that. But they say like we all get a turn. So because
Well, it's
I
coming for us
saw,
all.
yes, death, we can't escape death, period. But like I saw other people get through it. So when it was my process, like I had a little bit of time, I guess, in those like 2 weeks. It was like literally every day, like, is he gonna live or is he gonna die? Like daily. But we started to prepare for the worst. Like you can never really prepare. But me, my sister, like
You can brace for impact.
we did brace, and they were honest with us. The hospital was great. That was a good experience. If I can get to that at some point. They were really good to us, but they told us like he is very, very ill. Like it's grave. Like he was in the ICU, and at that point they had him on palliative, I think it's called. It's like not hospice. They're giving you comfort, but they're still
They're still
doing
trying
what they
to,
can
yeah.
to sustain your life.
Yeah.
But they're really bracing you for death and keeping you comfortable.
Well, that's good. That's because too often hospitals and medical professionals will lie to try to give you comfort, but it
Yeah.
doesn't give you comfort because it delays the inevitable. That makes the pain of something like this all that much
Worse.
harder to deal
Yeah.
with.
So they were honest with us, so I was able to brace. But I remember like I would sit outside, and I'm not like a prayer person. I was never like super religious growing up, but in recovery, I found like my higher power, which, I sometimes will call God, but I refer to it mostly as higher power. And I would pray every day outside audibly. Like I would sit outside under my little like lamp post and the moon would be there, and I would just literally hands together pray like, please heal my dad, like specific, like heal his lungs. Because every day they were like, they're not getting any better. Like, I'm like, oh my God, heal his lungs. Like, come on. And then once that wasn't working, like, I was starting to pray for like the strength to go on and get through this.
The funny thing about a higher power, whatever you believe in, they never give you what you want.
Yep. Exactly.
They give you what you need.
Exactly.
Now, your father was like a temporary angel in your life.
Right.
Who was there to facilitate your recovery and be your rock when you needed a rock the most, something for you to anchor yourself to. And when his job was done,
That was my job to come in and be that for him.
well, when his job was done with you, his mission was accomplished. Let's put it that way. And what I'm trying to do is, and I think I'm pretty sure I got this right, is put a very positive spin on something so tragic, which is your father's mission was to save you. He accomplished his mission, and there's some beauty to that.
There is.
There's some beauty to that. So now I'm sure going throughout your life, your father, there were some bad times.
There were.
There were. I'm sure that there were some arguments and some hateful words and stuff. But how often do you remember those?
Not unless I got to dig deep and think.
But you do remember the good things, right?
I do.
So that's what death does.
It's true.
Death wakes us up to the good times that we may have been blinded from for a short period of time. So what's your fondest memory of your father now?
My fondest memory of me and my dad is there's two. I'm gonna do us in the car when we would drive back and forth to school in his house. And like he'd pick me up from school, we drive home. I would always con him into stopping at McDonald's and to get a large fry. And I was like so skinny when I was a kid. Like my nickname from him was Bones because I was so skinny. So he was like, "All right, I'll get it for you, fatten you up a little." And it never worked, but we would always stop at McDonald's and just like laugh, like just enjoying him as a person. Like he was so funny and he loved like classic rock and we would listen to like his songs and he used to play this game that like we would get in the car. He's like, "All right, we're going to do name that tune."
Oh my God, I do it with my kids too. I do it. So when I die, they're going to be naming tunes.
Yep, that's what he would do. He would put the volume and then let like 3 seconds play or less, like 3 chords, and turn it down and then be like, "That is," and say a name. And I don't know if he's right or not, but he was just like doing it for himself to test himself, I guess. But we had fun. So that was one. And then Lake George is definitely another one. We used to go to Lake George every summer. My like integral years, we had a boat. It was just so fun. My dad was so cool. Like we'd be on the boat, like all the other families, we'd let them ride on our boat. Like it was just fun. We used to go to this like shallow bay called Log Bay where you anchor up and you could like put a bunch of boats next to each other with like the little, buoy to keep you from hitting each other. And we would go from boat to boat and get in the water because it was like waist deep. And just, I remember him always had like a Coors Light, like chilling. And those were his like best memories. And he loved to fish.
So the smile that you have on your face right now tells me all I need to know about your father, and I never met him once.
Yeah.
But I do remember hearing about him from Mike. So, Stefanie, what I want you to do now is I want you to tell our audience where they can find you and give out any plugs that you want. If you want to plug where you went to recovery, whatever
Sure.
you'd like.
So I'm definitely most active on Instagram. My Instagram is Gemini's because I am a Gemini. But we had this astrology talk before this started.
Yes, and some male figures in here got way too knowledgeable about astrology.
Kevin found out he's a Virgo. So there's
Kevin,
that.
I'm a Virgo.
So Gemini's is spelled, it's Gemineyess. So it's like a little play on words. So the I is spelled like eyes, like your eyes. Always thought that was kind of cool, but
Well, make sure I have looked at your Instagram. You got a lot of good recovery stuff on there, and your YouTube
you.
channel.
Yes, my YouTube channel too. Please check out my YouTube. I feel like that is the real me. Like my Instagram, it kind of got like this little traction going, and I post for like, me, but I also post for someone who's looking at my page saying like, this girl's got 5 years clean. Like, I remember when I used to look at people, I just wanted to see them living life. Like, I had a friend who got clean before me, and then she met someone, and then they had like the baby announcement, and I remember being like in the thick of it, like trying to get clean and being sick, and just like looking at this person and being like, I want that. Like, and now I have that, but it's easy to forget that like it wasn't always like this, and it didn't always have to be this way. So I like to share my YouTube because that tells my story.
But the great thing is you had to go through all this pain and suffering in order to be this person that you are today. To talk about your father with a smile, even though there were some bad times in the past, those sort of fade away after death, and the good times sort of come to the forefront.
They do.
But you have went through an enormous amount of suffering, from your addiction to your father's COVID death. And if you haven't learned anything from it, it's really a wasted experience.
Yep.
So we're coming to the end of this thing, and I always end every show the same way. And I want to find out what your personal suffering has taught you.
So my suffering taught me that suffering in itself is inevitable, but it brought out like this like warrior in me that like I'm proud to be. Like, it's an honor to show up as that person for somebody who doesn't think it's possible. And like I remember being that person, like not having any idea what my life could be. And if I didn't go through what I went through, I wouldn't be in recovery. If I just never picked up a drug, maybe I would have went to school, found a career, but I wouldn't have like a passion.
You wouldn't have a voice.
I wouldn't have this voice, no.
And that's
I
the
wouldn't
most
be able to
important
come on something like this and tell my story if I didn't get through it. Like getting through it brought this out, this, honor out of me that like I'm proud of. So people sometimes say like, oh my God, like I can't believe like you're so open about like your story. And it's like, I'm proud of it. I am.
Because you're a diamond, and the only thing that makes diamonds is pressure.
Pressure.
It's pressure. Well, thank you so much for coming in tonight.
Thank
I
you
really
so much.
enjoyed this. I enjoyed sitting down. I can't wait to see what's
Me
in
too.
store for you for the future. And when you have 10 years, we'll have you back in.
That would be amazing. Thank you.
And that's going to do it for this episode of the Suffering Podcast, The Suffering of COVID with Stefanie Shellhamer. And let's think about all the stuff that we learned. You can't pour from an empty cup. Kids believe they're invincible. Addicts are unbelievable actors. Invisible enemies can be just as deadly. Safety nets have some holes in them. But most importantly, let suffering bring out the warrior. And that's going to do it for this episode. Don't forget to go to popple.com, put in the code TSP20 for your 20% discount off your digital business card. Follow us on all social media. That's Instagram, Facebook, X, Clapper, OnlyFans. Follow me at Real Kevin Donaldson. And of course, follow the Suffering Podcast. We'll see you on the next episode.